Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of Analogpod. My name is Leonard Carillo. I'll be your host today, and together we're going to explore, probe, and celebrate the passions and very interesting journeys of artists and musicians from across the fruited plain. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. So today we are honored to have with us an extraordinary sax player and a wonderful friend of mine, Mr. Matt Braswell. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing real good, Leonard. It's a little bit rainy, but otherwise been a pretty good day.
Good deal. How you holding up with all this this sequesteredness? Is that a word? Sequesteredness? If not, I just made it up.
Exactly.
How you holding up with all this?
Oh, it's tough. You really look for the silver linings. The music industry is tough during quarantine, but I get to spend time with my boy that I wouldn't otherwise have. So, we make do.
Awesome. Well, listen, let's just jump right in. We want to get to know you and know all about you and all your dirty little secrets. If you have any, now's the time to air them. So anyway, well, listen, Matt, just curious, we've known each other for quite a while here, but let's let the audience know who you are. When did you first pick up the instrument?
Started saxophone in junior high. Interestingly enough, that was not my first musical instrument. When I was younger, probably around 6 or 7, my uncle played piano and keyboards throughout the 80s in a band that did blues and did a Blues Brothers review act. And he was really my influence for music. Watching him do what he did on stage and just watching him be a part of a band, I knew I wanted that immediately. Unfortunately, I didn't take to the piano quite as well, may have been due to age, but I did get a foundation in music. I still tinker with the piano. I still write music on the piano. But it was a few years later when I got into junior high and you get into the band program and they ask you, hey, what instrument would you like to play? And so I went to my uncle and I asked him, I said, what should I do? Thinking, what do you need in your band? And he said, pick a horn, any one of the horns. He says, I always have to play the horn lines on keyboard and it would be great to have horns. And I just thought, man, the saxophone looks the coolest out of all the horns. And I want that one. And the rest, as they say, is history. I just kind of took to the instrument and really enjoyed it.
Awesome. So speaking of history, give us a little bit of background of who you played with, what you've done, your musical journey. Give us a little background.
Sure. I'm a part-time musician. It's never been a full-time occupation, but I approach it professionally. I started playing out with bands in my very early 20s. I had played before that with kind of more academic settings, swing bands, college, but I played with my first, rock and roll band, if you will, in the clubs in my early 20s. It was a classic rock band actually called Blue Space, and was together with that band for quite a few years, and did vocals and saxophone in that band. But I've crossed over to all kinds of genres. I've played with larger bands that do more of the funk and the horn, full horn section. Some of those being After Hours, Touch of Magic, FBI Band, currently playing with a Hipper Than Hip band. Those bands are always fun, the horns. I've also done praise music. I've toured around Northern California doing different churches and actually putting together worship and the music along with that. And then I also do a lot of fill-ins and sit-ins and just kind of off the cuff stuff. I feel like that's my element. of course, there's something to be said about polishing a product and working on it and delivering it, but I also feel spontaneity and instant creativity is definitely an environment all its own, and I enjoy doing that. Um, One notable mention, I did get to play with Mick Martin and the Blues Rockers, although I did not play with him personally. I was actually added on his One Foot in Front of the Other album. When it was being mastered, they needed a soprano sax solo, and so I came into a friend of mine who was mastering the album and put that down in the studio. And from what I understand, it held a few weeks on the top charts in England. I can't remember, but it was like that was the song they liked, and I was like, I didn't even think I did a good job. I was like, well, how flattering, but yeah, just kind of done all kinds of things, but mainly with the vocals and the saxophone. A lot of heavy vocal harmony, especially in the praise stuff. It's been a few years since I've done that, but I really enjoy doing vocal harmonies and picking those out. And we've just played all kinds of things. I mean, anything from clubs to fairs, events, just kind of run the gamut.
So out of all the gigs you've done, the interesting question is, do you remember the very first time you got paid to play your horn?
No, I can't, I can't say that I do. Yeah, I guess I'm getting old because that seems so long ago. I'm guessing it was with Blue Space, but maybe not. Gosh, I don't know. I was before I was paying to play saxophone in a band, I was getting paid to host karaoke and doing things like that. So it was kind of already dabbling in it. And so, I guess maybe it just didn't stick out much to me that logical progression of playing live music and getting paid for that was just kind of an extension of what I was already doing.
Awesome. Conversation came up the other day. I was talking with another musician, and he was asking me about my journey, and I said, it's interesting. The music that I played and the music that I was getting paid to play was not the music I was listening to. Okay. And I was playing rock music, but I was listening to, and he kind of snickered when I mentioned some of the artists that I was listening to. I was listening to, Cat Stevens, the Carpenters, Bread, Earth, Wind and Fire, Chicago. And he says, that's just really interesting. I'm surprised that you didn't gravitate more towards that style. And I said, well, I was never really kind of in a situation where I was in control. I was like, okay, this is what we're playing. We need a bass player. Play this. So anyway, so I asked this question, okay, with the music that you're playing, what do you like listening to? Currently, what do you like listening to?
I mean, I don't really pigeonhole myself into listening to one style of music, I guess. It just depends. I totally understand where you're coming from with kind of the dichotomy of what you're currently playing versus what you're listening to. For me personally, I don't like to sit and listen to what I'm about to go perform or rehearse. So I do tend to listen to something completely different. For example, if I'm going to smooth jazz rehearsal, I'll listen to some harder core rock. I mean, I'm not a death metal person, but nothing wrong with death metal. But I listen to 98 Rock and kind of rock out on that on the way over, and then switch gears when I come in to do the jazz. And I don't know, it just sets up the mind of being able to, again, I like spontaneity and creativity, and being able to just switch those gears and go into something else is almost like that initial moment where you're in that creative space and you're going, okay, what do I do? And that's when some of the coolest stuff comes out. So, I, like you, I'm not typically listening to the stuff that I'm playing, although, playing with the big bands and doing the Earth, Wind and Fire and Tower Power and that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm always down to listen to that. I mean, that's just some of my favorite stuff, especially the Tower Power. Being a horn player, I can listen to that all the time.
Oh, absolutely. So what would you say your creative process? You're currently, what is your creative process? How do you get into that zone? What do you do personally?
It's interesting. As a saxophone player, it is kind of its own world. Well, as a horn player in general, but I would say even more when it comes to saxophone players, that there's this kind of academic approach, being real technical and almost having to prove yourself. And I'm not an academic. I haven't taken music theory. And so my approach again is more from just a creative side. I mean, of course you have to have put in the hours and learn the musical vocabulary to an extent, but my go-to and my comfortable area is definitely the free form. Just being able to kind of an extension of myself, play whatever's kind of feeling in the moment. And an old cliche is we never play the song the same way twice. And a lot of that is part of that process, because it's whatever you're feeling in that moment, even though it's the same song you may have played a bunch of times. It's kind of an extension of whatever, could be whatever you're going through, whatever happened that day, whatever. I mean, I think it all kind of influences it a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, because I know a lot of guys just, they want to put in the technical time, and they're great. The technical stuff that they do and the scales that they know. And but for me, it's got to have that personal, that touch, the connection to it.
No, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, it's gotta move me. If not, it's just technical, and I don't want to go there. So being a musician as long as you have, I know all of us have mentors. I've got a ton of them, and in fact, a few of them I'm going to actually be interviewing on the show, which I'm very, very excited about. But what is the one message that you got going through your journey that really had an impact on you?
A couple things, the concept of practice. I mean, none of this comes without a price, a sacrifice. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And yeah, I wish I had more time to practice 8 hours a day. I would love to do that, and maybe one day I will be able to, because I do feel like there's still untapped potential there. But certainly just understanding that it's not the gear, it's not the mouthpiece, it's not the cool jacket you're wearing. It's the practice that you put in, and the time that really pays off. And then the second part that has stuck with me throughout the years is that every musician doubts themselves at some point, and some more often than others, but I don't care who it is. They could be the greatest pop star, but they're going to have times that they feel like I'm not good. People don't want to hear me, and you can't listen to that. That's coming from a place that we all have inside, to self-doubt, your own ability. And I think even when you're hardest on yourself and you're thinking that way, most of the time, if not all the time, the audience is not perceiving that at all. And you just have to be aware that that is something you're going to go through as a musician. But I think a lot of people, that's kind of what stops their progress, and you can't let it do that.
Talking about practice, talking about putting the time in on the 10,000 hour scale, where do you feel you are?
So I knew you were going to ask this question, and I did the math. 10,000 hours is 416 days. I think I have far surpassed that.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
Only in gigs alone.
Yeah, well, I think the process is interesting because, you sit back and you go, okay, when someone asks you, how long have you been playing, and I've been playing since I was a very, since I was a kid, and you go, okay, you know, 2 weeks after I picked up my instrument, I was in front of a crowd, okay, which is very interesting. Did I know my instrument? Absolutely not. I mean, it was just, it was. I wish we had videotape back in those days because, well, I don't know. Maybe, maybe I don't want to. I wouldn't want to see it, but when I ask people about, how far along are you, and how do you get good, and I think one of the persons I interviewed not long ago said, practice doesn't make perfect. The old saying, practice make perfect, practice make perfect. He stated that he was told perfect practice makes perfect. And I'm a strong believer. I'm really not convinced that that anything really qualifies as perfect. So if you look at that, it's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, just work hard. I know when I rehearse, obviously we're learning, new songs all the time in the band, and I have to work at it. I can't sit back and just go, oh yeah, I heard that song, I think I remember how that goes. I've got to work at this. I got to work at it, even at the ripe old age that I am right now. And but anyway, I think that's what you were told. What would you tell someone that is just kind of starting out?
It's kind of a difficult concept because I look at it as I don't have a lot of time for personal practice. And when I say you put in the practice and you put in your sacrifice, for me personally, all that sacrifice was up front. I spent many days, many hours learning my instrument and playing by myself and getting familiar with it. And also acknowledging, I'm blessed with a very good ear and just kind of being able to do that. And so, for me, a lot of the times, and just spending the time having learned to read music, a lot of the times I can pull in a chart or I know the song in my ear enough. And also the fact that I'm a lead player lends me the ability to kind of come in on the fly. And again, going back to that comfortable space where I'm at, where I don't spend a lot of time in overthinking or pre-planning my part. Again, knowing that has to do with the fact I'm not a rhythm section player. But I think it's important to note, just because it can kind of define how you look at these things. If you're just starting out, at least on the saxophone, you're going to spend time sounding like a dead goose, you developing an embouchure. I know your situation, Leonard, where you picked up your instrument and you were in front of a crowd in 2 weeks. That does not happen on saxophone. It just doesn't happen. It's not an instrument that's conducive to that. And I'm not aware of, even the prodigies have to go through the development process of the embouchure, the learning the fingerings, how to hold the instrument, all that stuff, and just developing the muscle memory, diaphragm, all those things. So, anytime somebody comes to me and says, I want to learn how to play the sax, I'm like, I want you to understand something, that what you're saying is you're asking for a commitment, a year, 2 years, before you even sound like you know what you're doing, because that's just the process that you have to go through. But again, you know, once you get past that, that's when the rewards start coming in. And you know, back to what I was saying about myself, you know, I do a lot of stuff on the fly. I, you know, will sight read, bring stuff in, but that's where I know, for me personally, I wish I had the time to maybe study a little more, be a little more technical, be a little more academic. And that's something that I look forward to doing when, you know, in my life I have the time to do it. But for now, it's kind of been fly by the seat of my pants. I mean, I did have the academic structure in high school and a little bit of college, but you know, as much as I wanted to be a music major and major in saxophone and take music theory, I never got that far. So, but I think there's a level for everybody. I mean, you just, to me, it's that initial investment. Just be willing to put in that time. Know that you're not going to sound good day one, but that you get a step closer every day. Just keep doing it. Keep doing it. I'm actually teaching my son right now how to play saxophone, and you know, I see the look in his eyes. He wants to play, you know, what I'm playing right now, and I want him to play what I'm playing right now too. And it's like kind of remembering that whole process again of, you've got to be patient and you've got to be able to observe the small little increases and improvements daily to keep your journey going.
So he's not to the John Coltrane level yet.
No, I'm not to the John Coltrane level yet.
Okay, let's talk about your gear for a second, because I know we got musicians out there, sax players out there. What do you have, and what do you play? And tell us about your gear.
I have a lot of saxophones. I know there's some probably have more than I do. I'm not a collector. I'm a player. I prefer player instruments. And if you know vintage horns, you know that doesn't mean the prettiest horns. Going back, I started, my first horn was a Yamaha student model, YAS 23. And I played that for years and kind of really got comfortable with Yamaha. And then as I got older and started playing in bands and doing this kind of semi-professionally, I had this itch that I had to try all the brand, you know, I got to try this, I got to try that. Again, going through those years of what's going to make me a better player besides practicing. But it did give me perspective. I've owned Yanakasawas, I've owned P. Marriott, I've owned Selmer. Gosh, what else? Off brand, all kinds of off brands. But what I play today on tenor, I have a Cannonball Stone series that I play, that I take pretty much anywhere. And then I have a Selmer Mark VI that I will take to certain gigs due to the value and of course use in the studio. On alto, I have a reference 54, a Selmer reference 54, that I pretty much is my main player. Prior to that, I had a P. Marriott with the rolled tone holes, and I still have that horn as a backup. On soprano, I own a P. Marriott and a Kessler straight soprano. P. Marriott's a curved soprano. And then recently I picked up an old beater Amati baritone saxophone that it's a tank, but I've owned a few Barry saxes over the years. It's not a lot of call that I get to play, but for the price it was right. And so I'm kind of tinkering with that again.
Awesome. Yeah, and that Barry sounds great. You brought that to rehearsal last night, so that thing just like, yeah. I won't describe what I, but yeah, it was the tone was awesome. So anyway, and so we're talking about music. Where do you think? I mean, what are your feelings about where music is today?
Well, there's two sides to that story. I mean, you kind of have what's being released and played, you know, on major labels versus the internet environment. You know, I've long thought that there's been a trend of oversimplification of music, and kind of what is in vogue today is, it seems very simple to me. Um, a lot of repetitiveness, even the frequencies within the music, you know, a lot of bass and a lot of high end, but the mids are just being removed, and that's due to lack of natural acoustic instruments. And that's not to say that everything that being released is bad. It's just a trend that I've noticed. For me, I've always been behind the times anyway. For me, music is like a wine or a whiskey, or it takes time to age. And I know, there's probably people out there that would agree or disagree, but I grew up in the 90s, and that's when I was in high school, and a lot of that stuff, you know, at the time I just thought was silly. I was stuck in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, the stuff that my dad was teaching me to appreciate, which I'm glad he did. But at the time, I'm like, I have no appreciation for this music today. This modern stuff is silly. And I was the nerd, the band kid. I look back now, 15, 20 years later at some of this stuff, and I'm looking at like Sublime, Oasis, Soundgarden, Green Day, Red Hot Chili Peppers, all this stuff. And I'm like, I have a total appreciation for this music today that just was not there back then. And so I don't know if that's just having the time to, music is part of experiences, and when you hear those things in certain moments of your life and then they come back, I don't know if it has to do with that. I mean, I also know that you could just like a song the minute it's released, and that happens as well. But for me, I've always been kind of stuck in the past and a late bloomer. So maybe I'll think differently about the music being released today in 20 years.
Yeah, it's hard to keep it's hard to keep an open mind when you know how some of this music is actually produced, and you know like you, I mean, I've spent a lot of time perfecting my craft. Okay. And you can go online and order these different things that make sounds, that drone machines and the whole thing, and and that's been around for a while, so it's not anything new. But some of this stuff is just I categorize as noise. I just heard an interview from someone very, very well known, and I won't mention his name, but he just said some of the music that's being made today should not be being made. So and I have to I have to agree, and it's just like, okay. And I'm sure probably some people that are watching this are probably go, oh well, you're just an old guy, and what do you know? And it's like, I remember a couple of years ago, my youngest son, we were actually sitting, we were sitting in the front room, and he comes running in. He goes, Dad. He goes, I've got to show you something. I've got to show you something. I said, okay, what? So then he takes over the TV, and he puts this he goes to YouTube, and he puts this young lady, and her name is Billie Eilish. And I am sitting there just absolutely in awe of what her and her brother are doing. Okay. I mean, it's just and he goes, Dad, what do you think? I said, well, there's a tremendous amount of talent there. And I said, and what they're doing with it is so different. I said, it's kind of refreshing, because I said it's so different. It's not just this this spiking noise coming out of speakers, and what seems today is that there's a lot of vocals that that producers or whoever's doing it are trying to make the vocals sound like synthesizers. Okay. And I think there's a reason for that, because some of these vocalists, they can't really sing very well. So with all these tuners and different things on there, but it's like just you know you sit back and you go, Aretha Franklin. Okay, put Aretha Franklin on a tuner. Okay, I mean, it would be blasphemy. Okay, it just wouldn't be. So anyway, so I ask I ask you about that, and so anyway, no, anyway, and I appreciate your perspective. It's it's interesting. So you had an interesting experience that I'd like you to share. You know, with with COVID and things being shut down. I mean, we lost what 90+ % of our gigs last year because of COVID. And but we've had an opportunity to play, which has been great. And I've gotten emails from friends going, how are you doing this? How are you playing? I said, well, there's certain venues that are kind of just allowing us to come and play. But you had an interesting situation at New Year's. Share with us that experience at New Year's, because I think that was interesting.
Am I sharing the venue or just the
Yeah,
story?
well, just the venue and the story.
So, for those that are analog jazz fans, we play out at House of Oliver in Rockland, and House of Oliver has been open pretty much most of the time through all this, and that we did get some opportunities to play there. I actually played there with analog jazz, and I played there as a duet with another guitar player friend of mine in October. And when we were there, I was asked, would you come play for New Year's, Auld Lang Syne at midnight? And so I said, sure. And so New Year's comes around. Of course, COVID's gotten a lot worse, and things have changed. And not only that, I had recently been sick myself, and thankfully I was negative for COVID, but I had pneumonia, and so I kind of been through the sickness, and really didn't want to go through that again. But New Year's night rolls around, and I have my mom and my son with me, and we're watching movies and got a fire going, and it gets to be about 11:15, 11:30, and I said, well, I've got to go do this. And so I take them with me. We actually all decide to hop in the car and go to House of Oliver, because all I have to do is play this one song, which is a really great gig. By the way, I don't think I've ever been paid so well to come and play one song and leave. I wish they were all like that. So we show up, and it's, I was telling you, Leonard, just the feel of, everything shut down. It's New Year's Eve, and it's like you go all past all these places that and it's just dark. It's just everything's closed. It's dark outside, and it's like you're like, is this really New Year's Eve? And we pull up to House of Oliver, and I mean, it's like this light oasis in a desert. There's lights and flashing lights, and you hear the DJ music, and there was a trailer outside, and it looked like they were loading in games or loading out games that they might have been playing. I don't know, it just looked like this party in a desert. And so we go in, and I ask if my mom and my son can come in and watch me play for the New Year's countdown. And it was so interesting making my way through the people, and they had me get up on the bar with the owner, and we did the countdown, and I played Auld Lang Syne, which was interesting because I hadn't played in probably 5 weeks from being sick, but it went well. But I just remember, everybody loved it. It was great. We rang in the new year, and I just remember coming down off the bar and trying to get back through the people. It felt like they were all in my face saying, good job, we loved you. And it felt like a wide angle lens with everybody just right here, because I was just, still reeling in being sick and not wanting to be infected with anything again. So it was an interesting experience, but I totally enjoyed it. I mean, they're so welcoming there, and they love the sax, and several people just saying, oh, that was the greatest thing of the night. And I don't know what all they did the night before I got there, but it always feels good to have that acknowledgement. So overall, I chalk it up to, it was a good experience. It was just something unlike I've ever seen, where the times are definitely strange right now. And so that was a New Year's Eve unlike any that I've ever had before.
Well, I absolutely love that story, and it's interesting because it's like, well, us musicians will pick up gigs wherever we can possibly play.
Exactly.
you
Maybe
know
find some of that out there as well, because there were so many phones up pointed at me while that was going on before
Yeah,
it got put
yeah.
on Facebook and everywhere else.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Matt. If you could play with anyone, dead or alive, okay, uh, currently alive and obviously past, who would that one person be?
One person? Huh.
One person.
I guess I'd have to pick Lenny Pickett from Tower of Power, just because I'd want to pick his brain for for all kinds of technique.
Okay, no, that's interesting. So, okay, so let's have some fun here. I've got a bunch of questions here that I ask some of uh, my the people that I interview, and um, what's the most useless talent that you have?
Useless talent. Playing the saxophone? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know about that.
I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I mean, when I think of talents, I think they're all useful. um, I don't have an answer for that one. The most useless talent. Gosh, I don't know. Paper airplanes?
It works. It works. It works. Somebody said humming the other day. I don't know. I just like I don't know if humming is a talent, but I just thought, okay, that works. That
I know
works.
that. Well, that's the thing I was thinking of, is like all the useless things. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's a talent. And then I don't know if that's useful.
Okay, so this is a question I normally ask all of my guests, and so I'm going to ask you. Okay, if you were stranded on a deserted island and you were only able to have 3 albums, or in your case, 3 CDs, okay, because you're a little bit younger, uh, uh, and you insisted on having these with these, what would those albums be?
So I may be a little bit younger, but these are probably going to go back in time a little bit. So back to what I was saying, was exposed to my uncle who played piano. That was my first musical experience. That's what got me going. He played just like Billy Joel and Elton John. In fact, I used to sing with him as a kid and just listen to him play. And those songs, I'm a huge Elton John fan. And those songs that's what started my musical journey. And even though I don't play piano, my vocals are inspired by Elton John and just the feel of that music. So I would have to say, first and foremost, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road would have to be one of the albums. Um, for number 2, I might have to go with, gosh, it's so hard to pick which one when you're thinking of an artist. Uh, Definitely a Billy Joel album, either Stormfront, because Lenny Pickett played on that one, and I know that's not a totally popular one, but or one of his other ones. Gosh, I can't remember the title, with Innocent Man on it. Do you remember the title of that one?
I don't.
Yeah. And then the third one would be anything from Tower of Power, because I got to have my funky horn beats. So it would be any one of their albums, because I love them all.
Good choices. Good choices. Yeah. So, well, listen, Matt, it has been absolutely wonderful having you on the show today, and you sharing us with a little bit of insight of who you are and what you do. And we want to thank you for taking the time and letting us get to know you. And what uh, what 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 do you have next coming up?
Well, we're working on getting a lot of bookings throughout this year with the anticipation of things opening up, as you well know. Um, I do play in the other band, which is Hipper Than Hip, a 13-piece band that does Tower Power and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And hopefully that gets going again. That band took a full year hiatus. So, hoping that rehearsals go, start coming up again. But I know that there are things in the works for analog jazz, possibly some stuff in Southern California and the Bay Area, which would really be awesome. So, I'm looking at it two ways. I'm excited. I don't want to get my hopes up too much because I don't know where this COVID thing is going. But so I'm kind of just thinking, well, if not this year, next year. But certainly things are looking up, and I'm looking forward to playing any way we can.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute honor to play with you, and I'm looking forward to the future. And we'll just have a great time. So anyway, so Matt, thank you for coming on, and we wish you all the luck. And just keep blowing that horn, buddy.
Thanks, Leonard. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, you be safe and have a wonderful rest of the day.
You too.
Okay.
Bye bye.